Get all that turned on. All right. We're still in the book of Proverbs. I don't know how long we're going to be in Proverbs. Not gone that far ahead. I think, well, we can end here, but I don't know. We'll see how long we go. If y'all get tired of it, you can say something to me, and then maybe we'll go someplace else. But we're still in Proverbs, and tonight's theme is about advice. Now, I would say that it's about getting advice, but that's not exactly accurate. Mainly because getting advice is extremely easy. All you have to do is go into a Walmart with a baby, and people are going to stop you and tell you how to raise it. In mid-July, you can walk into a Walmart with just a onesie on the child, and people will say, "I can't believe you took that child out without a coat on." Or if you let that baby suck her thumb like that, she's going to get buck teeth. When Journey was born, we'd go to the store, and people would say things like, "Oh, you're getting to babysit." To which I would reply, "No, she's ours." And there would be this stunned silence for just a moment or two. And then they'd start offering advice on how rough it is, on what you need to do to raise a child once you're actually the age of a grandparent. You get the idea. Another easy way to get advice is to go into business for yourself. There are plenty of people out there who are glad to tell you where you need to spend your advertising dollars, what your prices should be, what your hours should be, and on and on. Another easy way to get advice is to coach a little league team. Aaron Pardue, who was the pastor at First Hemphill when I first got there, would tell me about this occasionally because he coached a little league team there in Hemphill. And even though his team would win a game, there were more than a few people who thought that they needed to give their input on what he needed to do in order to have a winning team. And he said the funny thing was that most of the advice that he got was usually about involving their child in playing more out on the field. The point I'm getting at is this. There's tons of advice out there. And there are plenty of people who are more than willing to offer it to you. The problem is this. Most unasked for advice is worth what you paid for it. And taking the wrong advice can get you in a lot of trouble at times. If you're in the process of getting it together and keeping it together, you need to fine-tune the art of taking advice. Because everyone needs advice from time to time. The book of Proverbs tells us that that's true. And it's essential to take advice in order to succeed in life. Proverbs 19:20 says, "Listen to counsel and receive instruction so that you may be wise later in life." Proverbs 12:15 says, "A fool's way is right in his own eyes, but whoever listens to counsel is wise." So tonight, I want us to look at 3 things that are going to help us to develop the skill of getting advice. Show where you should get advice, and then how to use that advice once you get it. So first of all, when you seek advice, you need to be selective. You can't take advice from just everyone, though sometimes it may seem that everyone is actually trying to give you advice. You have to choose who you're going to listen to. This is why I'm wary many times of unasked for advice. People who are wise rarely attempt to advise you until you ask for it, because they know that you have to be ready to hear the advice that they're going to give before it's going to do any good. Before you seek advice from anyone regarding a problem, you need to be careful to choose the right person to give you counsel. Proverbs 14:7 says, "Stay away from a foolish man. You will gain no knowledge from his speech." I like the way the Living Bible says it. It says, if you're looking for advice, stay away from fools. In other words, stay away from people who want to tell you how to run an area of your life that they're unable to manage themselves. While she was still alive, I don't think that it would have been wise for anyone to ask Elizabeth Taylor how to make a marriage last. Okay? You don't ask the Houston Texans how to win the Super Bowl, because they'd never been. You don't ask me how to lose weight and keep it off. Okay? You get the idea. When you need advice, seek out people who you admire and respect, who have the credibility to give advice. Proverbs 13:20 says, "The one who walks with the wise will become wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm." In your effort to be selective, before you go to someone for advice, this is what you need to look for. You need to find someone who's been there and done that. If you're poor and want to become rich, seek advice of someone who was poor and became rich. You wouldn't ask one of the Kennedys, for example, how to become rich, because the best advice they're going to give you is be born into a very wealthy family. You would ask someone like Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's, or Sam Walton. Find someone who successfully faced the challenge that you're facing and ask how they did it. That's one of the reasons that 12-step programs and groups are so successful. There's nothing magical about the 12 steps. The power that comes out of those programs comes from one person helping another to overcome the struggle of addiction. Someone who has never struggled with a compulsive behavior doesn't understand what that's like, and they're not going to be able to offer a whole lot of help. If they don't understand what you're going through, more than likely their advice is going to be trite, it's going to be cliche-ridden, and not much use at all. And you're probably going to end up just feeling more like a failure. But if you talk to someone who has successfully overcome the problem that you're looking at, the problem that you're facing, whether it's marital problems or a financial setback or some kind of an addiction, whatever it may be, they're going to be able to give you advice on how to deal with your situation. Look for someone who has experience, someone who has been there. And in your effort of being selective, you also need to find someone who has your best interests at heart. When you ask for advice, you're putting yourself in somewhat of a vulnerable position. You need to be sure that the person that you're talking to has your best interests at heart. That he or she isn't advising you with some kind of a self-serving hidden agenda. When I was in high school, I had two very close friends that I played Monopoly with. The three of us would get together anytime we were free, and we would play Monopoly together. To this day, my wife will not play Monopoly with me. She just won't do it. Because, I'm pretty laid back on most things. Not Monopoly. I play cutthroat Monopoly. But we would get together, me and my two friends, we'd get together and play Monopoly. We even had a little group. We called it Monopoly Players Limited. We had T-shirts made up and everything. We were kind of nerdy, I guess you could say. Well, once when we were playing, Dave asked me whether I thought a certain deal that Roger was trying to make with him in trading some properties was a good deal. He looked at me and said, "Hey, you think this is a pretty good deal?" And I said, "Yeah, I think that's a really good deal. You need to do it." About a half hour later, Dave lost to me. He landed on some of my property and couldn't pay, and so he was out, and I got all his stuff. A few moves later, Roger resigned because he realized he wasn't going to win. And at that point, Dave looked at me and said, "I thought you said that was a good deal." And I said, "Dave, it was a good deal for me. Because I could see what was coming." In the game of Monopoly, all advice that's given is entirely diplomatic. But you always have your own self-interests in mind. So make sure you don't take advice from the wrong person. Make sure that they have your best interests in mind. Be selective. Next, you need to be receptive. If you think one of the main reasons we hesitate to ask for advice is that we're afraid of hearing what we don't want to hear, I think that's accurate. When I was in college, once again, y'all are going to think I'm a jerk after I get done with the night. But when I was in college, I was dating this girl in college. And I kept having friends of mine that would come up and say, "I don't know that this is such a good idea." And she was like the first girl that I'd ever dated in school. Well, quite honestly, she was the first girl that I'd ever dated. And I had certain friends that were coming up to me and saying, I think you need to step back from this a little bit. And then they started saying, she doesn't necessarily have your best interests at heart, because she's seen some other guys behind your back. And they were offering unsolicited advice. And I just didn't want to hear it. And it got so bad that there was one friend who became very adamant about it. And I just turned and walked away. And at that point, our friendship became extremely strained. Later, I discovered that they were right. And everything that they'd been saying was true. But at the time, I wasn't receptive. I wasn't open to what it was that they were saying. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 4:13, "Better is a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer pays attention to warnings." When I think back, some of the biggest mistakes that I made in my life are decisions that I made without seeking anyone's advice. I did it all on my own. We looked at this verse a little earlier, Proverbs 12:15. "A fool's way is right in his own eyes, but whoever listens to counsel is wise." And just because you make a foolish decision once doesn't mean that you have to keep making foolish decisions. But you'll continue to flounder until you open your heart to advice from godly people. Take it from someone who's been there. Okay? Be receptive and be willing to hear what you may not want to hear. That's one of the reasons that it's a good idea for businesses to have a board of directors. It's why churches need godly people in leadership positions. Fact is, sometimes pastors need to hear what they don't want to hear. There are times when JR and I get in some discussions. There are times they get a little loud. Sometimes he says things I don't want to hear. More often than not, I say things he doesn't want to hear, but yeah. But you've got to get to the point to where you're receptive to hear things, even if they hurt, even if you don't want to hear them. So to recap up to this point, when it comes to getting advice, you have to be selective, then you have to be receptive, and then thirdly, you have to be objective. You've got to understand that no one person in the world has all the answers. There's not one human being that you can go to for advice on everything all the time. Besides, getting advice isn't about letting other people make your decisions for you. Getting advice is a process of getting an objective view of the situation so that then hopefully you can make the right decision. But ultimately, the decision that you make is yours. It belongs to you. Even if you follow someone's advice, it doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of your actions. It's your decision. You're the one that has to live with the consequences. So you need to make sure that you have an objective view of your situation. How do you do that? Solomon tells us in Proverbs 15:22. He says, "Plans fail when there is no counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed." So you don't go to one person for advice. You go to 3 or 5 or 7 if they're qualified. Then you get their input. If everyone says the same thing, then your decision is probably going to be pretty easy. However, chances are you're going to hear a variety of opinions and options. That's not necessarily a bad thing because it gives you the opportunity to examine the situation from all sides. Proverbs 13:16 says, "Every sensible person acts knowledgeably, but a fool displays his stupidity." The more information you can get, the more input you can get, the more research you can do, then the better your decision is going to be. But remember, it's your decision. You have to live with it. You have to face the consequences or reap the rewards. So make sure that you get an objective view of the problem. And you do this by seeking advice from several individuals, not just one. Asking for advice is probably just about the greatest compliment that you can offer someone. So make sure the person is deserving of that compliment. If you ever need it, I urge you to seek advice before trying to tackle any major problem or decision that you have. When you seek advice, you need to ask yourself the following questions. Has this person been there, done that? Does this person have my best interests at heart? Will this person tell me what I need to hear, even if I don't want to hear it? Can this person be one of a group of trusted friends to help me develop an objective view in my life? And if you do that, then your life is going to reflect the reality of God's promise that we can find in Proverbs 19, verse 20. It says, "Listen to counsel and receive instruction, so that you may be wise later in life." Take out your prayer sheets, if you will.